Wesley Carter was elbow-deep in mud, sweat dripping into his eyes as he tried to free the car tire buried in the roadside ditch, when a woman's voice, shaky, frustrated, and oddly calm, broke through the wind. "Are you sure it's not getting worse?" He glanced up, pushing his dark hair out of his face. She stood a few feet away, arms crossed, her heels caked in mud, and the hem of her cream-colored coat stained with slush. She was stunning, but totally out of place, like someone who'd taken a wrong turn on the way to a fashion shoot. "I'm sure," he said, gripping the shovel again. "Your back tire's just stuck. I've seen worse. It'll come out." Her eyes flicked to the toddler strapped in the backseat of his rusty pickup parked nearby, watching through the window, wrapped in a puffy orange jacket. "That your son?" "Yeah," he said, not looking up. "Liam, he's 3, and no, I don't usually bring him to roadside rescues, but daycare's a luxury these days." She blinked, visibly uncomfortable. "I didn't mean, it's fine." He gave a small grunt as he jammed the shovel under the tire. "You were driving a sports coupe through a dirt road in the middle of February. It was bound to end badly." She blinked again, then laughed short, embarrassed. "I thought it was a shortcut. You thought wrong." She smiled for the first time, and he caught it, brief, bright. It did something to his chest he hadn't felt in a long time, like someone had lit a match in there. "Name's Wesley," he said, leaning his weight into the shovel. "And you are?" Waverly Ashford," he nodded. "Nice to meet you, Waverly Ashford, who doesn't know how to use Google Maps." That earned a second laugh, and this time she didn't look embarrassed. 10 minutes later, with a groan and a spray of mud, the back tire finally lurched free. Waverly gasped and clapped her hands, genuinely thrilled. "You did it. I told you I would," said Wesley, brushing mud off his jeans. He looked like hell. His boots were soaked, flannel sleeves rolled up to his elbows, and his hands were stained with dirt, but he was grinning. She stepped forward, reaching into her coat. "Let me pay you for your time." "Please," he shook his head. "Nah, you don't owe me anything, just don't drive that thing through another back road. It's a city car." Her hand paused at her wallet. She frowned. "You're sure?" "Positive." She looked at him like she didn't quite understand him. Waverly had grown used to people expecting something: money, favors, connections. Not one man had ever looked her in the eye without knowing exactly who she was, and Wesley didn't even ask. Before she could say anything else, a little voice called out from the truck. "Daddy." "I want juice." Waverly smiled at the adorable boy pressed to the window. "He's cute." "He's a handful," Wesley said, heading back to unbuckle Liam, "but he's everything." She watched him lift his son out, gently brushing the boy's curls from his forehead. There was something about the way this man held his son, protective, steady, like the world could fall apart, but he'd keep this little boy safe no matter what. "Thanks again," she said softly. He glanced at her, nodding. "Drive safe." She hesitated a second too long before getting into her car. As she drove away, she couldn't stop glancing in the rearview mirror. Wesley was standing by his truck, Liam resting on his hip, both of them waving goodbye. Waverly felt something strange tug in her chest. She didn't know why she cared so much, or why she couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd refused her money, or the way he'd smiled at his son like he was the center of the universe. She didn't know that this man covered in mud, with holes in his boots and a heart too big for his own good, would be the one to change everything. 2 weeks passed. Waverly sat in a glass conference room on the top floor of Ashford Capitol, her name etched on the wall behind her. She wore a sharp navy dress, diamond studs, and a pair of heels worth more than most people's rent, but her mind wasn't on the quarterly numbers. It was on a man who'd refused her money, a boy with wild curls, and the way her name had sounded in his mouth like it wasn't attached to a net worth. She had Googled him. Wesley Carter, 31, widowed, raised his son alone after losing his wife in childbirth, worked odd jobs, lived in a run-down duplex in a forgotten corner of town. He hadn't even known who she was, and she couldn't stop thinking about him. The next Saturday, Waverly drove the same road on purpose this time and parked near the diner she'd seen in the background when Wesley had loaded Liam into the truck. Sure enough, he was there. Inside, wearing jeans and a t-shirt with a faded logo, Liam sitting beside him on a booster seat, swinging his legs while coloring on a napkin. She pushed the door open and walked in. Wesley looked up, surprised. "Waverly," she smiled. "Hey, you lost again." Nope, she said, walking over. Found exactly what I was looking for. He stood, unsure what to do, rubbing the back of his neck. Want to join us? Liam looked up. Is that your friend, Daddy? Waverly's heart did something strange again. Yup, Wesley said, eyes on her. She's my friend. They sat together for over an hour. Waverly talked to Liam about dinosaurs and blue crayons, then to Wesley about his work, the part-time construction gig, and how he was saving up for a better apartment. He didn't complain. He didn't pity himself. He just talked like a man who carried everything on his back and still found ways to smile. By the end of the meal, Liam yawned, curling against his dad's side. I should go, Waverly said quietly. Wesley stood, lifting his son. Thanks for coming. She hesitated again. Can I see you again? He blinked. Me? Yeah, you. He looked down at Liam, then back at her. You want to see a broke single dad again? I do, she said, smiling wide. Very much. Wesley stared at her like she was speaking another language. You don't have to understand it, Waverly said softly. Just say yes, he smiled. Yeah, okay, yes. And just like that, everything started. Wesley stood behind the counter of Monroe's Hardware late on Thursday afternoon, adjusting Liam's jacket as the boy sat on a stool beside the register. The store was quiet, the usual weekday lull before the after-work crowd filtered in. He had taken on extra hours to cover the heating bill, and Liam sat beside him drawing in a spiral notebook with a purple crayon. The bell over the door jingled. He looked up, expecting one of the regulars, maybe old Mr. Devlin from the auto shop, but instead, Waverly walked in, her hair pinned back, black jeans tucked into low boots, and a dark wool coat still dusted with dry snow. You found me, Wesley said, surprised. You told me where you worked. I just listened, she said, brushing her gloves off. I had a meeting nearby. Liam's face lit up. Hi, hey, Liam, she said warmly, coming closer. Still drawing dinosaurs? No, I'm making a spaceship now. Waverly leaned just enough to glance at the paper. That's a very fast-looking spaceship. It goes faster than Daddy's truck. Wesley chuckled under his breath and turned to sort a stack of receipts. Not hard to beat. Waverly's eyes scanned the store shelves crammed with bolts, screws, paint cans, and rows of tools. A radio played faintly in the background, something old and bluesy. Didn't think I'd see you in a place like this, Wesley said, not looking at her. I didn't think I'd want to come to a place like this, she replied. Yet here you are. I was hoping, she said, quieter now, you might want to have dinner with me tomorrow. He paused mid-count, his fingers still on the register drawer. I mean, she added, if you're not working, if you have someone who can watch my neighbor Marla. She sometimes watches Liam in the evenings. Would she be free tomorrow? Wesley looked over at his son, who was now carefully adding flames to the bottom of his rocket. Yeah, she'd do it. Then it's a date, she said, her voice light. I don't have anything fancy to wear. I'm not looking for fancy, she said. I just want you. He didn't respond right away. Something flickered behind his eyes, not hesitation exactly. Something older, cautious. I'll pick you up, she said, holding his gaze. He gave a small nod. All right. The next evening, Wesley stood in front of his bathroom mirror, tying the same navy button-down he wore to church once a year. He'd shaved. The shirt was snug across the shoulders, but clean. Marla watched Liam in the living room, feeding him leftover spaghetti and keeping an eye on the cartoons. Outside, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. Wesley stepped out onto the porch as Waverly climbed from the back seat, her cheeks pink from the winter air. She wore a burgundy coat belted at the waist, her hair down, curls brushing her collarbone. You clean up well, she said, smiling. You look like you stepped out of a magazine. He opened the car door himself, not waiting for the driver. As he slid in beside her, he noticed the leather interior, the faint scent of her perfume, the way her gloved hands rested gently in her lap. The car rolled through the city, past worn-out storefronts and flickering streetlights, until the buildings got taller and the sidewalks wider. They pulled up in front of a restaurant with velvet ropes and a valet waiting under a gold awning. Wesley turned to her slowly. This place looks like it charges for the water. It's a tasting menu, she said. Just come in with me. Inside, the dining room shimmered with crystal lights and hushed conversation. The host greeted Waverly by name and led them to a table near the window, where the skyline unfurled in glittering towers. Wesley sat stiffly, eyes on the silverware. "I don't know which fork to use. Use the one that feels right," she said gently. "The rest doesn't matter." As the meal progressed, the tension faded. They shared a roasted beet salad, then a seared duck breast with caramelized figs. Wesley tried things he couldn't pronounce but admitted were delicious. Between courses, she leaned closer and asked, "What made you start working at the hardware store?" "I needed steady hours. Liam was sick a lot that first year. I couldn't be on a construction site every day." "Do you miss building things?" He nodded slowly. "I do. There's something honest about it. You see the progress. You know what your hands did. Nothing fake." She hesitated, then said, "That's why I like being around you." He glanced up, surprised. "You don't pretend. You don't try to be someone else. Not much point in pretending when your boots leak and your fridge makes more noise than a jet engine." She laughed, and this time it wasn't polished or polite. It was real. He studied her. "Why me, Waverly? You're the first person in years who didn't want anything from me," she said. "And the first person who made me feel like more than a name on a door." He didn't speak for a moment. Then, "You're not what I expected either." She tilted her head. "What did you expect? Someone who runs from mud, not someone who shows up in it." The plates were cleared. Dessert arrived, a delicate pear tart with rose cream, and she took a bite, then set her fork down. "I don't want this to be a one-time thing." "I don't do casual," Wesley said. "Not with a kid in the picture." "I'm not asking for casual." His eyes searched hers, quiet intensity in every line of his face. "I've got a lot of mess," he said. "I'm not shiny or smooth, and I've already lost more than most people." "I'm not here for perfect," she said. "I'm here for real." The valet brought the car around. Wesley opened her door again, and when she slid in, their hands brushed. He didn't pull away back at his place. He walked her to the porch. Marla had left the lights on inside, and Liam's little shoes were by the door. "I had a good time," he said. "Me too." They stood there, winter swirling between them. Then Waverly leaned in, her lips brushing his cheek. "Good night, Wesley." He watched her go, the tail lights disappearing into the dark. Inside, Liam stirred in his sleep, curled beneath his blanket with his spaceship drawing clutch to his chest. Wesley stood by the window for a long time, heart thudding in a way he hadn't allowed in years. He didn't know what this was becoming. But for the first time in a very long time, he wanted to find out. Waverly stepped off the elevator into the marble foyer of Ashford Capital's Manhattan Tower, her heels echoing under the chandelier. She wasn't here for a shareholders' meeting or board strategy session this time. She was here to speak to her father. The receptionist straightened as she passed, but she didn't acknowledge them. Her mind was already spinning ahead. She found William Ashford in his corner office, standing behind the glass desk that overlooked the skyline. He was reviewing a stack of documents, tailored suit pressed, cufflinks glinting. "You came back early," he said, not looking up. "I needed to talk to you." His eyes flicked to hers. "Is it about the Palm Beach acquisition? It's not about business." He set the pen down. "I want you to meet someone," she said. He studied her face, the way he always did when he sensed something wasn't transactional. "Who is he?" "His name is Wesley Carter. He's—" She paused. "He's important to me." William's mouth tightened. "Is he in finance?" "No." "He's a builder." A beat of silence. "Then you mean like a contractor?" "He's raising his son alone. He works with his hands. He's honest, kind. He's not one of us." Waverly's jaw tensed. "I'm not asking for your approval. I'm telling you I care about him. You've always been selective with affection. Why now? What's he giving you you didn't already have?" "Everything I never did," she said. "He doesn't want my name. He doesn't care about where I've been or what I own. He listens." Her father folded his hands. "You think that makes him worthy of you?" She took a step forward. "I think it makes him better than anyone in this building." His expression didn't change, but the silence was sharper now. "You're making a mistake." "I'm not." She turned and walked out. She didn't wait for him to call after her. Because he wouldn't. He never had. That night she drove herself to Wesley's. The porch light was on. A paper star Liam had cut out was taped to the front window. Wesley opened the door before she knocked. "You okay?" "I told my father about you." He exhaled slowly. "That sounds like it didn't go well." "He doesn't think you're good enough." Wesley leaned against the doorframe. "I'm not surprised." Waverly stepped in, brushing the cold from her coat. "He's wrong. He shut the door behind her but didn't speak right away. "I'm not afraid of what he thinks," she said. "But I don't want to hide, you shouldn't have to." "Then don't make me," he nodded once, then turned toward the hallway. "Liam's asleep. He wanted to wait up, but he passed out with a flashlight in his hand." She laughed softly. "I brought something." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small box. Inside was a hand-carved model of a rocket ship. Wesley looked at it, eyebrows lifting. "Where'd you find this?" "A man on the Upper West Side makes them." I asked if he took commissions. For Liam, she said. Wesley held the wooden ship in his palm, running his thumb over the smooth edges. "He's going to love it." They moved to the couch. The apartment was small but warm. A candle flickered in a jar by the window. The scent of cinnamon hung in the air. "I've never brought anyone to meet my father before." Wesley looked at her. "Why me?" "Because I trust you." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You need to know something. A few years ago, before Liam was born, I took out a loan I couldn't repay. I thought I could patch things together with side jobs, but it got worse. I've spent years trying to fix it. I'm still not there." She didn't flinch. "You're not your debt. I'm not proud of it. You don't have to be. I'm trying to build something better," he said. "For him. For anyone who comes close to us." "I see that." He looked down at his hands. "I don't have a ring or a plan, but I know how I feel." She reached for his hand. "You don't have to say it yet." "I want to. But I want to earn it first." "You already have." She leaned in, pressing her lips gently to his. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't grand. It was quiet and steady, like the beginning of something that would last. The next morning, she found herself in the kitchen, barefoot, pouring juice into 2 mismatched glasses while Liam colored at the table in his pajamas. "You're here again," he said simply. "I am. You gonna stay?" Waverly glanced at Wesley, who stood beside the sink, watching her with a look that said everything he hadn't said last night. "Yeah," she said. "I think I will." Later that week, Waverly took Wesley to a charity gala. She hadn't planned to until the board demanded her presence, and she realized she didn't want to go without him. He wore a borrowed suit from her driver's cousin. She wore a floor-length black dress with silver stitching along the sleeves. The room glittered with old money and curated smiles. As they stepped into the ballroom, murmurs started. Whispers followed her like a tide, but she didn't flinch. Wesley leaned toward her. "You sure this is okay?" "Very." Halfway through the night, her father approached. Alone, Wesley stood taller, his shoulders squared. William Ashford's eyes moved between them. "You clean up well." "I don't need your compliments," Wesley said. "You have them anyway." Waverly's brows lifted. "Is that approval?" "No," her father said, "but it's acknowledgement." He looked at Wesley again. "When you shake someone's hand, you better mean it." Wesley extended his. "I always do." They shook. Brief, firm. As her father walked away, Wesley turned to her. "That was strange." "That was monumental," she whispered, half stunned. He reached for her hand. "Dance with me." They moved onto the floor, surrounded by chandeliers and strings of violins. "I don't know the steps," he said. "Then we make our own." She leaned into him, the world spinning around them. And in that moment, surrounded by silk and glass and 100 eyes, Waverly realized she wasn't falling anymore. She had landed. Wesley stood in the middle of the living room, his hands dusted with flour, staring at the half-assembled cake on the counter. The plan was simple. Bake something for Liam's preschool fundraiser, drop it off, then head to the park for the afternoon. But the icing had other ideas, and so had Liam, who was now sitting on the floor with frosting on both cheeks and a plastic spatula in his hand. "Daddy, the cake's melting." "It's not melting, buddy. It's just thinking about being cake." Liam giggled, and Wesley wiped his hands on a towel as a knock sounded on the door. He opened it to find Waverly holding a brown paper bag and a coffee tray. Her cheeks were pink from the brisk air, and her hair was pulled back in a loose braid. "Emergency delivery," she said, holding up the bag. "Chocolate croissants and caffeine. I had a feeling your kitchen was in distress." He stepped aside and she walked in, surveying the scene with raised brows. "This is either a cake or a cry for help." "I'm leaning toward help." She placed the bag on the table and crouched beside Liam. "Hey, Captain Frosting." "I helped," he announced proudly. "I can tell, very artistic." Wesley watched her, something pulling at his chest. She moved through the space like she belonged there, like she'd always known the rhythm of their mornings. She had stopped asking if it was okay to show up. She just came, and somehow, every time she did, the place felt more like home. He poured the coffee and handed her one. "Thanks for rescuing us. I couldn't let you face a preschool bake sale alone. That sounded terrifying." They stood side by side, sipping coffee and watching Liam try to roll frosting into a ball. "He asked if you were going to be at the fundraiser," Wesley said quietly. Waverly turned to him. "Do you want me there?" "I do," she nodded. "Then I'll be there." Later that afternoon, they stood in the school gymnasium, surrounded by folding tables covered in baked goods and construction paper signs. Children raced between the tables, and parents exchanged polite small talk and sideways glances. Waverly had traded her usual heels for sneakers and wore a canvas jacket over a navy sweater. She helped Liam arrange cupcakes at the edge of the table, letting him decide which ones needed sprinkles and which ones looked extra snacky. A woman approached Wesley, her arms crossed. "You're Liam's dad, right?" He nodded. "I saw your son with Waverly Ashford." "That's her, isn't it?" "Yes." The woman's eyes narrowed. "Didn't realize she was involved in the school. Is she donating something?" Wesley's jaw tensed, but before he could answer, Waverly stepped beside him. "I'm not donating anything today," she said. "I'm just here for Liam." The woman blinked, then offered a stiff smile. "Well, it's nice that you're connecting with the community." After she walked off, Wesley turned to Waverly. "You didn't have to do that. I wanted to." He offered her a crooked grin. "You're full of surprises. You haven't seen my dance moves yet." That night, after Liam had fallen asleep with a cupcake still clutched in one hand, Wesley and Waverly sat on the couch in the quiet. "I got an offer," she said without warning. Wesley set down his glass of water. "What kind of offer?" "From a firm in Paris. They want me to lead their global expansion team." He blinked. "Paris," she nodded. "It's a big deal." He hesitated. "Is it what you want?" "I don't know," she admitted. "It's everything I thought I was working toward, but now," he waited. "I don't want to leave this behind. You don't have to decide tonight." "No," she said softly, "but I have to decide soon." Wesley leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "I can't give you Paris. I'm not asking for Paris." He turned his head to look at her. "You're asking for something harder. I'm asking you to believe that I'd choose a life with you even if the rest of the world looks shinier." He reached for her hand. "It doesn't get shinier than this." 2 days later, Waverly walked into her father's office without knocking. He looked up, surprised. "I'm not taking the Paris offer." He didn't speak, but she saw something flicker in his eyes. "I'm staying, and I'm stepping away from day-to-day ops at Ashford Capital." His brows lifted. "I'm not disappearing," she said. "But I'm not living to impress you anymore." He leaned back in his chair. "You're in love with him." "I am." He nodded once. "Then don't waste it." Back at Wesley's house, she found him in the backyard, building a small wooden structure beside the fence. "You're constructing something." "A treehouse," he said, gesturing to the lumber. "Liam's been asking." She stepped closer. "You're doing this by hand." "I wanted to build something that lasts." She placed a hand on the beam. "You already have." He looked at her, eyes steady. "You sure you want this?" "I've never been more sure of anything." He pulled a small box from his pocket. No velvet, no theatrics, just polished wood and a single ring inside, simple, silver, and honest. "I can't give you a castle," he said, "but I can give you forever." She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She said yes. 3 months later, they stood in a small garden beneath a canopy of string lights. Liam held the rings. Marla officiated. The guests were few neighbors, close friends, and a handful of people who didn't care about last names. Waverly wore a soft ivory dress that brushed the grass. Wesley wore the same navy shirt he'd worn on their first dinner, sleeves rolled up. As she took his hands, she whispered, "You saved me that night in the mud, but you didn't just free my car. You freed me." He leaned down, pressing his forehead to hers. "I'd do it again every day." And as they kissed, with Liam clapping wildly beside them, the world outside that garden faded away, because this was their beginning, built not from money or names or legacies, but from love. Earned and chosen. And real. The morning sun filtered through the thin white curtains in the bedroom, casting a soft glow across the wooden floorboards. Waverly stirred, her hand instinctively reaching across the bed to find Wesley already gone. She sat up slowly, the faint scent of coffee wafting through the air. From down the hall, she could hear Liam's laughter, unfiltered and bright, the kind that made walls feel less like walls and more like home. She padded barefoot into the kitchen, where Wesley stood at the stove flipping pancakes with Liam perched on the counter beside him, wearing a superhero cape over his pajamas. "Morning," Wesley said, glancing over his shoulder. "We're making breakfast for Mom." Liam beamed. "I cracked the eggs all by myself." "Most of them made it into the bowl," Wesley added with a wink. Waverly leaned against the doorway, smiling at the sight of them. Her husband crouched to help his son stir batter, their movements easy and familiar, like they'd been doing this forever. "You two are dangerously charming," she said, walking over and planting a kiss on Wesley's cheek. "Sit," he said, nudging her toward a stool. "We've got this." She watched them finish breakfast, her fingers absently tracing the rim of her mug. There was a time not long ago when her mornings had started in glass towers and ended in silent apartments. Now her life had rhythm, texture, laughter. After breakfast, they bundled up, packed a picnic, and drove out to the edge of town where the treehouse had finally been completed. Liam had painted a sign that read "Captain's Headquarters" and insisted it needed a flag. Wesley promised to find one. Waverly brought a quilt and books, and they spent the afternoon reading on the grass while Liam climbed up and down the wooden ladder, his cape fluttering behind him. Later, as the sun began to dip low, casting long golden shadows across the clearing, Waverly turned to Wesley. "Do you ever miss the quiet?" He looked at her, brow furrowing slightly. "What do you mean, the life before this, before us?" He shook his head. "There's a difference between silence and peace. I didn't know that until you." She rested her head against his shoulder. "I used to think I needed to be impressive. Now I just want to be present." "You already are," he said. "Every second." That night, after Liam was asleep tucked in with a flashlight and a stuffed rocket, the two of them sat out on the porch beneath a sky scattered with stars. Wesley held her hand, his thumb brushing gently over her ring. "I've been thinking," he said, "about the lot behind the school. The one that's been cleared for months." She turned to him, curious. "What about it?" "I want to build something there, not for work, for us. A place kids can play, a garden, maybe a tool shed for weekend projects, somewhere the neighborhood can gather." She looked at him, heart full. "You want to build a space for the community," he nodded. "I've spent so long trying to fix things in pieces. I want to create something whole." "I'll help," she said without hesitation. "We can fund it together," he smiled. Side by side, always. Days turned into weeks and the project took shape. They met with city planners, recruited volunteers, and hosted fundraisers. Waverly used her connections to secure materials, but kept her name off the press releases. She didn't want recognition, only results. Wesley designed the layout himself, balancing practicality with creativity. Liam insisted on a climbing wall and got it. The grand opening happened in spring. The trees had started to bloom, and the air held the kind of promise that only came after a long winter. Children poured in, laughter echoing off the new play structures, their feet kicking up clouds of dust and sunlight. Parents mingled, neighbors shared stories, and for once, the town felt like a tapestry instead of a collection of separate threads. Waverly stood beside Wesley, watching it all. "You built this," she said. "We built this." When the ribbon was cut and the speeches ended, someone from the local paper asked to take a picture of the couple who'd made it happen. Wesley hesitated, glancing at Waverly. She nodded. "Let them." The photo ran the next morning with a headline that read, "Builder and Heiress Break Ground on Hope," but they didn't read it right away. That morning they were in bed, wrapped around each other, the newspaper forgotten on the kitchen counter. "I never thought I'd have this," Wesley said quietly, his hand resting on her hip. "You have it," she whispered. "All of it." He kissed her, then slow, deep, and certain. Years passed, but nothing dulled. The love didn't fade, it rooted. They celebrated anniversaries in the backyard. They painted the treehouse again and again as Liam grew. They added a swing for when he no longer needed ladders. Wesley took on fewer jobs, spent more time teaching local kids how to build. Waverly started a foundation that offered scholarships for trades, not just universities. One evening, as summer waned and fireflies blinked in the tall grass, they lay in the hammock together, Liam now 10 and asleep inside. Waverly looked up at the stars. Do you remember the first time I saw you? Mud, broken tire, bad map, she laughed. And you still helped me. I'd do it again. 1,000 times, I know, she said, and I'd still ask you to dinner. He pulled her closer. Still the best yes I've ever given. They didn't need more than this. No penthouses, no headlines, just love worn in like denim and steady as heartbeat. And in the quiet of that night, with the hum of crickets and the warmth of each other, they knew they had everything, forever had arrived, and it was perfect.